Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Lunch was good. I hear all the chit chat. It's lovely. I know, Adrian, nobody's listening to me. Is this on? Is this on? Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. If you are outside the conference room, you can come back in. This is a quick reminder that if you have not had your picture taken, you can do so at the next break. Okay, so just go out to the office, which is just out there, and all of our friends, they will help you get your picture taken. Okay? And please remember that the prayer room is open. People have been praying for all of us, all of you, consistently for months and months, and so there is time to go into the prayer room. And like we were reminded at 7 a.m., if you are an early bird, friends, you can get in there as well. So we just have a video that we're going to watch, a short video from Tithely, one of our sponsors, one of our key sponsors. So let's watch this video from Tithely. Thank you.
With Tithely Giving, churches can receive donations from virtually anywhere, which means giving just got a whole lot easier. Giving to your church shouldn't be complicated, so Tithely helps make it easy for your congregation to give. Tithely Giving empowers your donors to give however they like, whenever they like. They can give by app, text message, website, check scanning, admin gift entry, and by kiosk. Plus, our giving form gives your donors the ability to edit their recurring donations, a streamlined login flow which supports phone and email login, and offers multiple payment options. We are excited to announce that Tithely now supports donations using Canadian pre-authorized debit for Canadian churches. This new bank-to-bank payment method allows donors in Canada to choose a payment method with a lower fee than donations made with a credit card. The fee for donations using Canadian pre-authorized debits is 1% plus 30 cents. Also, we've made it simple for Canadian donors to set up their bank-to-bank payment method right from the giving form. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Tithely for free today. That's right. Tithely Giving is $0 a month, and you can start collecting donations today. Check it out at tithe.ly.
Ooh, thank you. What are you waiting for? Sign up for Tithely, friends. I am looking for Reverend Josiah. Reverend Josiah, are you here? Thank you. Come on up. Thank you. We'll do the video first. Thank you.
Communion, or the Lord's Supper, is one of the most important Christian practices. Free Methodists consider the Lord's Supper a sacrament, which means it is a means of grace, a symbol of our faith, and a sign of God's grace. We believe Christ is present in the Lord's Supper in a special way, and that when we receive it in faith, we spiritually partake of Christ's body and blood, although there is no change to the bread and drink. Free Methodists don't prescribe one particular form of the Lord's Supper, but all communion services should include 1. A confession of sin and a request for forgiveness. 2. A retelling of the biblical story which we are called to remember through the sacrament. And 3. Words of consecration and distribution. Communion provides an opportunity to look back and remember what Jesus has done. Look inwards and confess our sin. Look out to a world in need. Look up to his risen presence. Look around in fellowship, and look forward to when Jesus comes again. We're to receive communion, and so proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 26. The table that Jesus hosts for this holy meal is open to anyone who turns to Christ in faith, and it draws the community together as a sign of love and unity that Christians have among themselves. Article of Religion 125. The Free Methodist Church in Canada deeply values the meaning and experience of the sacrament of the Lord's table.
Let's pray. Father, I thank you for your presence. Lord, I thank you for this gift of communion that is both a reminder and a declaration of what you have done and who we are in you as your children. Lord, I think about how when you initiated this at that table with your disciples, God, they didn't understand what was just about to happen. Yet despite their misunderstandings, you still chose to offer them a meal. And you offer us that same meal. Lord, that meal that declares your love for all of us. I thank you for your grace. I thank you for your mercy. And I thank you for your loving kindness. Would we experience that in deep ways? And thank you for this way of experiencing it that declares to our bodies that we are yours. It is a gift, and we say thank you. Amen.
So as we move along in the agenda, we're heading into another task force report. This morning we heard from the RG task force, and now it's my privilege to present our BOA report on the LGBTQ2S+ task force. And so we're just going to follow something of a similar format. That is that I will introduce some things, give you some comments with regard to how this unfolded. Then we will turn it over briefly to the chair of the task force, that Jessica will provide a few words from their perspective. And then we'll come back to look at the BOA responses and where we see all of this headed. So here we go. So this task force has completed their work. They have submitted their final report to the BOA. We are fully aware that this has been an arduous task. We are aware that there have been some real challenges to this work. We're grateful for the fact that they have invested themselves over this last several years toward this project, for the seriousness with which they embraced their task. We're grateful for the thoroughness of the work that we were able to review, and all the more because we realized that much of it was conducted in the face of what was sometimes unfair criticism and sometimes not very kindly reiterated or responded to. So there was some unfair criticisms along the way and some unkind words that were exchanged. And so we realized that it makes that even more challenging for a task force such as this. We are aware of that. And so we appreciate the work that was done. I will not be going into the background or the BOA commissioning of this particular task force. We've had previous venues through which we were able to explain that. There have been a number of online forums over the last few years, and in the last set of regional gatherings, we spent some time talking about this task force as well. What I will say, though, from the BOA's perspective at least, that this was, from our view, this was intended to be a journey of reflection. That is, that we committed to embarking on a journey, a pathway of exploration. We had no presuppositions as to where this would actually end and what the outcomes would be. That doesn't mean we were floundering. There was a strategic plan, and the task force did take that strategic plan and unfold their work based on that. But I can recall the day around the BOA table when we decided this was important work that needed to be done. I remember all of us kind of looking around at each other and saying, well, we feel like we need to step into this journey, onto this pathway, and let's prayerfully see where it takes us, and we'll unfold it as we go. And so we started in on that journey. And of course, the overall mandate, I'm sure you're familiar with. We've heard this several times, but I would paraphrase it by saying that the overall mandate was to equip pastors and leaders, members, all of us, our churches, to be able to minister more effectively to LGBTQ2S+ people and their families, to be able to engage meaningfully in those lives, and especially to be able to express Christ-like love in those settings, but all of it within the framework of our theological position on human sexuality. That was the overall mandate. So again, from the BOA's perspective, that meant that we felt that this would help us all to gain a better understanding of the complexities around this issue. And I think that would serve us in good stead, because as we continually engage with people for whom this is relevant, then for us to understand the complexities around this are going to help us to be able to minister more effectively, going to be able to help us to relate and understand the experiences that we're hearing about. And so I think one of the main reasons why we wanted this work to be done was to help us to gain all that better understanding of those complexities. We asked the task force then to foster open and frank, respectful conversations, to get those conversations going. Let's talk to each other about this, because that would help those kinds of conversations and interactions and the information that we learned through the task force work would help us all to learn to show Christ-like love in a more meaningful way, perhaps to do this better to the people for whom this is relevant. We also asked the task force to find ways to gauge our church's views and positions, so the positions of the people, our members, pastors, and leaders, to help us understand where we are currently sitting with regard to our perceptions and views on that issue. And then we told them, or our understanding was that then we would determine if and how we could actually implement some policies or guidelines through things like recommendations that may lead to resolutions that would help us to clarify some of our positions and would help us to be able to effectively minister in these areas to enhance our ministry efforts. And I would say that we have been successful in all of these endeavors to varying degrees. We'll hear a little bit more about that as we go through this. So the task force work centered on three important questions. These are not the only questions that were being asked. These are not the only issues that were being considered, but they were important questions. BOA agreed. We had set that out in the beginning, and we felt that these are three important questions that would sort of help us drive many of the conversations and much of the work that would unfold from that. You've heard the three questions several times over, so I'm just going to remind us that these questions were pertaining to, for example, the first question was pertaining to finding a more robust way to celebrate celibacy as a God-honoring lifestyle. Question 2 was related to determining the degree to which members can hold alternative Bible-based views on human sexuality, the degree to which they can hold those views and declare those views being a member of the Free Methodist Church. And the third question was around the degree to which pastors could hold a diversity of conviction in their interpretation of biblical sexuality. So recall those questions, and they were focused on these three areas. And so in the end, when we got the final report, we did in fact receive some recommendations from the task force. We received actual crafted resolutions that they had developed that would address each of these three questions. And those resolutions were intended for us to take under consideration, perhaps, for example, that would eventually mean some changes to Chapter 6 in the manual or some changes in policy and procedures. And so they were given to us to make those considerations. So the resolution that was crafted around question number 1 that we accepted from the BOA was accepted by the BOA, and we determined that that was good work around the issue of celibacy, and they've put together some text. In your full report from the BOA that you will have seen in your documents, you can find that text there. And we agreed that that was good work, and we will move that ahead as we continue on. We also gave consideration to the proposed resolutions around questions number 2 and 3. Those we found that the BOA could not endorse. We appreciated the thorough work behind those recommendations. We appreciated the gracious tone of the language that was surrounding those recommendations. But in the end, we were unable to accept them and move them forward. We are aware that this is deeply disappointing to the task force, and so I just wanted everyone to understand that we did not take this decision lightly, that the BOA spent lengthy and intense deliberation around these two recommendations, spent considerable time working through and seeing what we can do with them, how we can perhaps work with the task force. We were working through a process like that, but in the end, by the time it came to the point where we had to decide whether or not we would move them ahead, we made the decision that we could not. And here's why. So first of all, it became apparent to us that a majority of our pastors and leaders and members across our denomination were not in favor of advancing some sort of exemptions or alterations to our membership requirements. Any kinds of exemptions on our theological positions, we're not in favor of advancing that. And we learned that through the survey data themselves that showed that a majority, 2/3 at least, of the respondents to the survey indicated that they were not in favor of advancing those kinds of resolutions. In addition to that, I would say that we also gained considerable anecdotal evidence around the BOA, and that, for example, just using my own personal experience as an example of that, so as chair of the BOA, I received more feedback and communication on this issue than on any other during my tenure. The vast majority of what I heard were people expressing concerns or outright opposition to advancing any sort of resolution that would provide those kinds of exemptions that were captured around questions 2 and 3. And so that led us to believe that there appeared to be a majority of people who were not in favor of advancing these, and we couldn't ignore that. And the second reason would be that as we were working through these, we around the BOA table were not able to reconcile these proposed exemptions or these resolutions with our membership covenant statements in the Common Constitution of Chapter 1. We couldn't find a way to reconcile what the resolutions would be proposing with those membership covenant statements in Chapter 1. So to help us with our thinking along those lines, we did reach out to a recognized consultant in World Conference governance issues, Dr. David Kendall, who's here today. And it was Dr. Kendall's opinion that if these resolutions, number 2, based on questions 2 and 3, were to have gone forward, that they would be found to be unconstitutional by the World Conference. And so for those reasons, we felt that we could not advance these recommended resolutions from the task force. We do, however, would be clear in saying that we do not suggest then that this was just come and gone, that this is just a wasted time. Not at all. We do feel that there were significant advances made. I'm going to spend a little time in a few moments to outline what some of those things we see them to be. But I want us to understand that we don't see this as the end of this conversation, that we don't just see this as, well, we got to here, we couldn't feel like we could accept or endorse those recommendations, so we'll just wash our hands of that and walk away. That was not the attitude at all around the BOA table. The attitude rather is that we need to continue in some form and to advance our thinking, our prayerful, careful consideration of ministry efforts in these areas, and we'll get to some of those a little bit later on as I come around to the BOA responses. But just wanting you to understand that we don't see this as a stop point. So I will spend some time to outline a little bit of some of the things that I feel that have been accomplished by the task force. But in the meantime, we're going to invite the chair of the task force, Jessica Isaac, to come on up, and Jessica is going to say a few words from the task force perspective.
Good afternoon, members of conference, delegates, observing guests, special dignitaries, pastoral spouses, Ministry Center staff, and all others who join us here today. I don't have a panel of speakers. Unless you guys plan on coming up. No? Okay. I also don't have any slides or a clicker, so it's just me, and all I have are my words. But words are powerful, and they have capacity to do hurtful or harmful things. And I hope that my words today are helpful.
and that they do justice at representing the story of this task force. Now, I trust you had a chance to read my written report, which was nestled in the middle of the LGBTQ2S+ task force report. I don't plan to reread it. I'm not going to do that. But if you haven't had a chance, I do recommend that you read through it, and it summarizes other things that I won't be saying today. My intent here is to review where this task force came from, to summarize the work that was accomplished over these past 3 years, and to remind us as a denomination, as Dave already has, that this work is not finished. When this task force began, many people reached out to our team asking where this conversation was coming from. It seemed to be a surprise to some people that we were discussing this particular subject. And some people expressed shock and confusion and fear about the potential denominational implications of the task at hand. I attended a church health and planting coaches meeting just this past Monday, where one coach said, when this topic was mentioned at the 2014 General Conference, he was disappointed that there wasn't a Q&A. Now, I don't believe there's going to be a Q&A as part of this either. And the Q&A is not my focus here anyway. Although I'm sure some of you would like to ask questions. The date, it's the date that I'd like you to focus on. 2014. That was 10 years ago. So for those who felt like this conversation came out of left field, I remind you, this conversation has been going on for at least 10 years. This work is not new. I've been looking back to find out when the FMC started having official conversations about this subject. So it's been 7 years of intentional committee and task force work. Dates back to 2017. But there was work going on in SCOD even before that. SCOD was doing work between 2014 and 17, and it was mentioned at the 2014 General Conference. In fact, I found out it dates back to regional gathering conversations that took place in 2013. This conversation has been taking place in an official, public capacity for over 10 years. So anyone who thinks that this conversation is hasty or it's rushed, you're mistaken. Over 10 years of time, many people's time has gone into this, including discussions at ministers' conferences, consultations with SCOD and the BOA, collaborative efforts of a committee to form a strategic plan, and then the formation of this new task force, which allocated 3 years to ask questions and to listen to the denomination through various avenues. This work is not new. Over the course of our time, the task force encountered some confusion about our mandate, so I'd like to read it now. This mandate has been listed on our website for the past 3 years. It's been in communications that we've printed, documentation, it's been spoken at our meetings, and I just want to reiterate it. This is what we were asked to do, which came out of the denomination's strategic plan. Over the course of our time, this task force, this is what it is. I was going to repeat myself. This committee is here to help move the conversation forward and to plan and discuss forums and communication moments. We're here to take notes and feedback what we hear, to write reports, and to help people understand what is going on. We primarily act as planners and communicators. Eventually, it will be up to us to assist in creating a series of motions, the product of the dialogues that we are about to have, and that we now have had, that will be considered by the BOA and other relevant decision-making bodies and be presented at General Conference 2024. The purpose of this task force is to implement the FMCIC's strategic plan for equipping churches to minister more effectively to LGBTQ2S+ people. In addition to providing pastoral resources for churches, it is leading the denomination in asking the Lord the following 3 questions. You're probably all familiar with the 3 questions by now, but I'm going to read them. 1, should we include a statement in our manual encouraging celibacy for LGBTQ2S+ people? And if so, what should that statement entail? 2, can people with an affirming theology of same-sex sexuality, including LGBTQ2S+ people, be members of our churches? And if so, under what conditions? And 3, is it possible for our clergy who do not align with the FMCIC on our doctrine regarding same-sex sexuality still to minister in our movement? And if so, under what conditions? This work, including the 3 questions, as Dave has already said, was part of the FMCIC's greater strategic plan. It was not something that the task force itself created. As stated in our mandate, the intention was, as we understood it, to bring motions to General Conference, which made the news from the BOA about the rejection of 2 motions very disappointing. We tried our best to move the conversation forward. We took notes and we reported back what we heard. We worked diligently at exploring the questions, and we crafted motions based on what we heard. Here are some of the things we accomplished in our time. Very early on, we assisted in forming a care group for FMCIC pastors with family who identify as members of the LGBTQ community. A necessary and helpful thing to create. We formed 3 subcommittees, each one dedicated to one of the 3 questions being asked. In an effort to help our churches, we provided resources on our website, including the former committee's report, a link to assist with terminology commonly used to describe the diversity of gender identities and sexual orientations within the LGBTQ2S+ community. Video resources about the FMCIC's view on biblical sexuality, as well as a video and a dissertation about becoming a hospitable place for LGBTQ people. We provided opportunities for input and questions and thoughts and comments. We organized a number of engagement points, including 9 different public forums or focus groups where discussion and interaction was encouraged, and actually a total of 19 if you include the most recent regional gatherings. We developed and implemented 2 denomination-wide surveys, one with clergy and delegates, and the other was opened to any church leaders who wanted to participate. One had 176 responses, and the other had 177. Every single entry was read. That's a lot of information to work through. Additionally, our task force fielded and personally responded to over 40 direct email communications. We tried our best to work towards the milestones of our timeline, which were crafted directly from the 2020 strategic plan. At times, we stopped or were delayed. For example, like the time where we created the video on the FMCIC's view on sexuality, because people asked us to. After our forums and our surveys, we spent several days in September of 2023. We evaluated what we had heard. We were looking for common themes and crafted the motions. We presented the 3 recommendations / motions to the BOA in November of last year at its BOA meeting. I received several emails in December letting me know that it was taking the BOA more time than expected to consider our work, and that the motions would be sent to SCOD and MEGAP for review, as we had suggested, because we value what our own internal committees bring in working together and collaborating. We did not receive the final reply from the BOA until January of 2024. And as you know, one of our motions was accepted, and we were told that 2 were deemed unconstitutional. And we were also disappointed to hear that those motions were not sent to SCOD or MEGAP, as formally indicated. But I remind you that this work, it's not over. Board Chair Dave Kreitzweiser, sent me the reply to the BOA in January, and he wrote this, quote, and he already said this as well, but he wrote this: "We recognize that this can be taken by the task force as a rejection of your work," unquote. But, he says, "I assure you that is not it." He said the BOA firmly believes our work was sincere, thorough, meaningful, and helpful. And I know he says that out of genuine meaning. I believe him when he says that. And yet, it still feels like a rejection. Over 10 years of work, hours upon hours of time and research and reading and planning and listening and discerning went into what we presented. The members of this task force are the best people that I have ever had the chance to work with. They are deeply gracious, even when taking verbal hits. They chose to listen, even when some people accused their character. They stuck it out to complete their work, and they tried to offer a balanced solution, seeking what so many people asked for: unity. Not uniformity, unity. A way for us to be together and to stay together, even in the midst of difference. For those of you who showed up to forums, who took time to fill out surveys, and I know they were long, who emailed us, and who engaged, we are glad you chose to be involved. For those who found this subject difficult, but chose to come to the table in a respectful manner, thank you. I cannot say this work was easy, because it was not. Some people told us they found this conversation unsettling. But it has also been communicated how necessary this conversation is, how thankful some people were that we were finally discussing it, how proud they were that our denomination was choosing to do this. It's revealed to us that our people hold complex and varied perspectives on this topic as related to celibacy, membership, and diversity of conviction among pastors. Now, although only one motion moved ahead, I've been assured by the BOA that our efforts were not in vain. Our hope is that the BOA will use our work to create productive and meaningful ways to continue to support our pastors and churches and congregations moving forward. Because this work, it's not over. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. Appreciate hearing from the task force and their perspective. As Jessica has mentioned, and I've alluded to earlier too, there was a very difficult process and difficult decision that we had to come to. Although the BOA felt that we had to come to this decision that we could not advance 2 of the 3 recommended resolutions, we do feel that there was much accomplished. We feel that there's still much to be learned, and that especially there's still much for us to apply to our lives as we engage from day to day with people to whom this is relevant. And so some of these things have been mentioned a little bit earlier before, but I thought we'd just take a few moments and just let you know from our perspective some of the things that we really feel was accomplished through this process. That is that we stuck with the open and frank conversations. We stayed with the conversations even when they got really difficult. We stuck to the process. Partway through the process, we on the BOA, and I know the bishop for sure, heard from many who suggested that we should disband the task force, that we should abandon this effort, that it was taking too much time, etc. I heard all kinds of those things, but we felt it was important to follow through the process, see where it takes us, see where we end with it, and to stay with the process and stuck with it. So I think that's something worth mentioning. I am convinced that we all have gained a better understanding of the complexities around this issue. I think that's important for us because it helps us to understand these issues so that we might more meaningfully engage with people around us. So I think we have taken some big steps forward in that regard, largely based on the work and the information we have learned through this task force process. We have, in fact, re-examined our views on human sexuality, marriage, and singleness. And through that re-examination process, we've been able to frame a message, I believe, that is more around being positive and hopeful and not judgmental. I believe this work has helped us to advance our thinking in that regard. We're convinced that the work of the task force has helped us all to better understand how we need to be paying attention to our language and to our posture as we engage with people in the LGBTQ2S community, their families, their associates. We need to pay attention to our posture, to our language. They've helped us to understand how important that is, helped us to understand ways in which we can show Christ-like love in our engagement with people in this, to whom this is relevant, in a way that's God-honoring, in a way that's not judgmental, but rather showing love. And the task force work has helped us to understand that a little bit further. And I do believe that related to that, many of us have been challenged about thinking about how we can engage LGBTQ2S plus people into our church fellowships, how we can welcome them into our churches, how we can welcome them into our friendships, not if. It's true that not everyone would be there yet, and I know that we haven't reached a consensus on how or what that might look like, but I think we have advanced this thinking considerably through this task work. And again, I can speak on a personal level from that. I've had conversations in my own local congregation in Sault Ste. Marie, and there have been a number of people, as we've relayed some of this information and brought them up to date with regard to the task force work. I've had a lot of people approach me and come to me and say, I never really gave this a thought before, but now I understand that this is happening in our communities, happening in our families, and we need to learn how to reach out to all people, to minister effectively to all people who come into our churches, who come into our sphere of influence, including LGBTQ2S plus people. Prior to this process, they really hadn't even given it a thought, and now they're thinking very deeply about that. I think that's an example of how we have advanced in much of this thinking through this process. We have agreed to develop a robust position on celibacy, as you've heard, so that recommendation that resulted in a proposed resolution based on question number 1 has been accepted by the BOA. We'll be working through that process to get that into our manual as a more robust statement on celibacy. I'm going to suggest that we've learned some things about having difficult conversations. We've learned that they're difficult. We have learned that when conversations got difficult, we've not all been as gracious as we could or should have been. I don't mean to be ungracious now, but I'm just going to say that even as I ponder the notion of forbearance that we saw in Ephesians chapter 4, we all kind of nod to that. But when the conversations get difficult and the views become somewhat polarized, there's a strong tendency to be less gracious than we should be. And we are a family. We are the body of Christ, and we are particularly a family in this denomination. And so I think we're learning about having difficult conversations. We've also learned some things about how not to have those conversations. And I trust that as we continue to deliberate, as we continue to have the conversations, as we continue to think about implications, we'll do a little bit better in that regard. So with regard to the path ahead, the BOA has spent some time thinking about this, and these are early days, let me just say. And that is that certainly the resolution to clarify and elaborate our position on celibacy is moving forward, as I said, so that one we will move ahead on. We recognize that this work has also helped to prompt some more comprehensive and broader examination of the bounds around membership requirements for being in the FMCIC. This is work that Scott has already have on their radar, been working, I think, in this regard already. But that is re-examining what the bounds around our membership requirements might be. So helping us to achieve some clarity on what the essentials and non-essentials might be. But of course, all of those would be grounded in our acceptable scriptural interpretations and in our common constitution requirements. And so this has also been another issue that's helped us to realize that we need to be thinking a little bit more broadly and thinking to advance our understanding of what it really means to be a member within this denomination. And so it has sparked some of that work as well, as we see that going forward. We are committed to taking this work and developing some sort of an implementation committee or a team. We're not sure yet exactly what that will look like or how it will function, but the idea is to take the work that the task force has generated and, for one thing, make it accessible. That some of it already is, but we'd like to put it into some sort of a format or an accessible repository that people would have access to. So taking the information and putting it into a format that's accessible to all of us and usable for helping churches, pastors, leaders, members, all of us to just understand a little bit better how we should respond in certain circumstances. So if then situations would arise, and we can envision something like, if we encounter these kinds of questions, then we would respond along these lines. If we are challenged with this, then we can respond in this way. So it's an attempt to pull together to work, to take advantage of the work that the task force has spent so much time on, to pull it together into some usable products and a repository. And that, we believe, will move us toward actually developing strategies for helping us deal with ministry efforts, helping us deal with perhaps legal entanglements that might arise from some of these things that come to fore. And so that's our plan to move this ahead. So again, just to say that we do appreciate the work of the task force. We are fully aware the task force is disappointed in this particular outcome that the BOA has felt we needed to land on. Last night at the town hall, the BOA town hall, we spent the whole session on this particular topic. It was a spirited discussion. We heard the message from those that were disappointed. We heard. It's registered. We will take it under advisement. We're not going to open the floor now to further questions, but I would invite any of you that if you're wondering about any of this or some process or anything that was said today, that certainly you can find myself or any other BOA member milling around somewhere. We'd be happy to have one-on-one conversations in this regard. But for now, I thank you for your attention to this task force report, and we move back to Paula.
Thank you. Thank you. And so now we're just going to watch a short video from one of our key sponsors, the Canadian Bible Society.
We are the Canadian Bible Society. Since 1804, our work has helped millions of people around the world hear God speak through His Word. Lives are transformed because Bibles are provided in heart languages, and people are equipped with resources that help them understand and apply the Word every day. We continually seek and create fresh ways to serve people longing for God's Word by working together with community leaders. As a result, Indigenous and immigrant communities here in Canada have Bibles and scripture resources in their own language. Our use of technology, like the Scripture Untangled podcast and audio scriptures, is instrumental in seeing people formerly disconnected from God's Word find relevant, practical insights for their life. Internationally, we work with Christian communities light where despair, doubt, and darkness rule. When lives are at risk, where faith is suppressed and trauma is profound, when youth need hope and the church seeks assistance, we are there to help. We are the Canadian Bible Society. We help the world hear God speak.
Thank you. And now I will invite Reverend Jervis, our Senior Director for Church Health and Church Planting, to come and share his report with us.
Just gonna place my stuff here. Whoa, such a different view from here. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jervis. I currently serve as the Senior Director of Church Health, together with Church Planting. Before I came into this role, I've always believed in the preeminence of Jesus. Basically, he goes ahead of us. He's always previous to every initiative that we take. Everything that we do as a church is a response to what Christ has done, what the Holy Spirit is doing. And so I believed strongly that the history of the Free Methodist Church held nuggets of wisdom for me, because God has already been working before I got here. John Wesley would talk about it as, prevenient grace or something like that, right? So one of my tasks, moving into a moving train, which was going at quite a fast pace and meandering along the way, was to ask the coach attendant or whoever I could ask, where are we coming from? And another important question is actually, where are we right now? And where are we actually going, please? And then to look at my ticket on board the train and to try to discern if I'm on the right train. And I'll tell you that over the period since I was hired last year, June 2023, my investigations, trying to think about hindsight, how do I gather information that will help me understand where we've come from, the history of the movement, or insight into where we are, looking through the windows of a moving train and trying to understand where are we really, and also trying to think, have foresight into the future. My investigations have proven over and over again the God who initiated creation came down in flesh in the person of Jesus Christ and gave us his blessed Holy Spirit. The Trinitarian God has been at work in this movement even before I was born. I came with a clear sense of the perception that God is at work. And I don't say that lightly, because I believe he is at work. And what I'm going to do here is to try to give you a little bit of a summary of what I discovered when I came into this role, with this huge mandate of being in charge of directing the health of the church. Let me just tell you what I did when I got my letter of understanding before I signed it. I knelt down and I said to God, this title sounds like the title of the Holy Spirit. Senior Director of Church Health. I said, so before I sign it, could you promise me that you're going to take that seat? Because your greatness cannot be competed for. There is no credible alternative to having Jesus at the top as the head of the church. Colossians 1:15 says that he's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn from all creation. For by him all things were created, heaven and the earth, whether principalities, dominions, all of that. He is the head of the church. He's the firstborn from creation, that by him all things will be consisted together and he will have the preeminence. And so I said, Jesus, if you can't have preeminence over this, I have nothing else to do in this role. So I'm going to give you a bit of a summary of what I've discovered. First of all, I came to recognize that where we are going is encapsulated in the vision of the Free Methodist Church, which I found very fascinating. The vision of the Free Methodist Church is to see a healthy church within the reach of all people in Canada. And I know it's an evolving vision. I actually looked up the history, and thanks to Greg in the Heart of Free Methodist course, who gave us a really good summary of where we've come from as far as the vision has been concerned. But as everybody can see, health is a priority for us as a movement, isn't it? When I read it the first time, I recognized that it's more important for us to be healthy than to be Free Methodist. Some people look at me like, what are you saying, Jervis? You don't say that at a general conference, right? But literally, if you read the vision statement, not only does it invite us for perceptive insight, what does it mean to see a healthy church within the reach of see, perception? It means our theological definitions of what health is and the practical implications of that. We have to be intentional about it. We have to discern it. God must be with us in making that possible. I mean, there was a lot of things I discerned from that. I'm not going to go through all of that, but I could see for a fact that health of our churches was a priority to the movement. So I said, okay, that's helpful to know. And I hope that we can all embrace that reality, that we have the responsibility as leaders and delegates to nurture healthy churches. One of the things I also discovered, not just the vision of, and the evolving vision of where we're going, which was helpful, I also discovered that there's been a lot of restructuring that has taken place over the past years, a number of restructuring. So, in one of the blurbs that I received as part of my job description, I recognized that there's been a lot of restructuring with the intention to revitalize the organization. And as part of that, the church health department was separated from the church planting department, from the leadership development department, and merged with the church planting department, particularly with the vision to strengthen and revitalize the organization. So that was on my blurb in my job description. So I asked questions, and like I said earlier, I believe that God has already been at work, so I did something. I reached out to some of those who have served before I came here, like Jared in his role, and Mark at that time was still the senior director of leadership development, and had long conversations with him to try to understand where we've come from and where we're going, and the intention of some of those things that happened. So I really want to first say thank you to all the leaders that have served faithfully this ministry, which I still firmly believe God is taking to a very special place. Internally, a few things have happened in the more recent history since I've been here. I'll just say that since I came into 2023, which was last year, June, the focus has been, like I said, trying to understand where we've come from, conversations that would lead me to that place where my focus, I embarked on a 4-month listening tour. And part of that was to speak with pastors and delegates and attend churches and congregations to be able to understand where we've come from, what's happening now, and all of that kind of thing. And, okay, let me see where I'm at in my notes here. So let me highlight a few of the internal things that happened in terms of our team. In the latter half of 2022 and throughout 2023, we experienced restructuring. So we had 2 coaches who were regional, one regional and one church planting coach who stepped back from their role. Laura Lee, who was working with the church planting department in the data department, kind of helping with data and things like that, she became an administrative assistant for our department. And Jessica Isaac, who was previously the administrative assistant to the director of church planting, increased her hours from 14 to 17.5 and was officially given her role as the church planting coordinator effective January 1st, 2024. She's been very instrumental in helping us within this transition phase. And So that's Laurelie and Jessica, and then our regional coaches as well, who have been coming alongside boards and pastors to help equip and encourage them to pursue being healthy and taking responsibility for their community, have been a tremendous encouragement, not just to me, but mutual encouragement to each other and just the churches that they are serving. So I just want to say thank you to all our church health and church planting coaches. If you're here, can I see your hand up so people see you? And yes, thank you for your work. Really appreciate all that you've done. Yeah, that would be good. I mentioned a listening tour. After my listening tour, which was 4 months, I engaged during that listening tour with, like I said, lots and lots of different communities of people, pastors, delegates, past staff, present staff, NLT, and I'll show you a list of the people I spoke to. But during my listening tour, I had to ask an important question. What am I listening for, and what are the things that I want to hear? And like I said, where we're coming from, where we are, and where we're going. But I had to frame it clearly so that I can get the right information at the right time. And so what I decided to do was to kind of put together some of the things that I have learned personally coming from a different culture and ministering in the new cultures. It's happened to me so many times. And every time I get into a new space, I have to ask the question, how do I know what is happening here? And how do I discern that? And so I like this language of specifications. So I kind of crafted an acronym that reminds me of the specifications of a gadget. I don't know how many of you are familiar with, the specs of your laptop or something like that. That basically talks about the details of the components that are built into the device. So before a device can be repaired, you need to know what you're working with, right? And to develop a frame of reference and all of that. So that was something that I decided to kind of use as my framework for listening. And so I'm going to give you a little bit about what that is. That was the specs of the Free Methodist Church. I was asking a number of questions. What are the beliefs, affections, and practices that mark our religious engagement within the Free Methodist Church? That's the spirituality side, the S. The P was personality. At that point, I was looking at some kind of a profile to help me understand the distribution of churches across the country. What are the kind of ethnicities we have represented here? What are the languages that are being spoken? Where is the concentration? Where is, so I realized that we have a diversity, like you've heard in some of the reports. We are a denomination that is welcoming immigrants from all over the world. And we actually have churches that are Chinese-speaking, Tamil-speaking, French-speaking, all of that. So it's important for us as a denomination to pay attention to that. So that's the personality kind of conversation. And then experiences. What stories, what background, what are the things that have happened over the past few years that have really left a mark on who we are as a movement? And I'm thinking about all of this in light of where we should go in terms of church health and planting. And so another lens that was helpful for me is to think about that in terms of who Jesus is. The C is the culture. So spirituality, personality, experiences, and culture. With experiences, we're looking for stories. With the culture, we're looking at what are the traditions and customs and values. It's a lot of things when you think about what culture and an ethos is. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of my findings and where we are going because of that. But let me just pause and say, after my 4-month listening tour, in November, I met with the coaches, got their feedback. Am I hearing right? Have I missed anything? They gave me more information that helped me refine my notes. In January, I met with over 30 pastors and leaders gathered over Zoom, partnering with the the prayer team. And we listened together. It was about a 3-hour meeting. So I'm going to try to condense some of the things I shared there and some of the group discussions that happened afterwards. And we had intercessors assigned to each Zoom breakout group, and we had scribes who were listening to feedback from these pastors, because I wanted to hear from them if I was hearing right, and how does that impact how we serve the churches moving forward. We got some really valuable insights coming from that meeting in January this year from all those pastors. So thank you so much, the National Prayer Team, and those of you who were invited. Thank you for providing very valuable information that helped us as a department to think about the future. And in February, the department which includes the team that I just showed you, went away for a retreat where we were beginning to wrestle with some of these things, including the IDI, team building, and the future of church health and planting. So I'm going to try to summarize the information that we got to do over an entire weekend in February. That was like a 3-hour session in January. And in November, we had about 2 hours with the coaches to share some of this. So I'm sorry in advance if I'm going to be going through the slides really quickly. It's because it's a lot of information, but I just wanted to make sure that as a conference, you get to hear and see some of those things. So just going to move through there. So the spirituality of the movement. How are we going to discern what the spirituality of the movement is? Basically, you're thinking about 3 main things. Orthodoxy. What are the beliefs of the Free Methodist Church? I'm sure everybody knows that, right? What we believe in. Hopefully you do, as a pastor and a delegate here. But for me, part of how I was going to learn that, I designed an independent study. Thank you, James Pedlow, who helped me to do that from Tyndale's perspective and Fuller Theological Seminary as part of my Doctor of Ministry program there. An independent study that looked at Wesleyan theology, but also spiritual renewal and revival in the history of the church, and how a special Wesleyan orientation can help us in the work that we're doing. So that was part of my understanding, the process of understanding the orthodoxy of the movement. But you're thinking spirituality, you're thinking of 3 main areas. It's not just what we believe in, okay? There's also orthopathy. It's what the affections that come out of who we are and how we express ourselves to God. And there's the orthopraxy. That's the practices and behaviors. The stuff you see in brackets in the slide is when you go into the extreme without the balance of the other 2, what it looks like. So if you're just focused on orthodoxy without the orthopathy and orthopraxy, you can get into intellectualism. In the second one, if you're focused just on that, you can get into sentimentalism. In the third one, if you're just focused on just orthopraxy, you can get into just moralism and activism. So the brackets is the extremes. But one of the wonderful things I realized about the Free Methodist Church is that even though we're known to be a denomination that, most people would refer to the Wesleyan tradition as the affective denomination, more passion, heart religion, I would say we combine orthodoxy, orthopraxy, and orthopathy in a very healthy way. That was one of my discoveries that I made, that we actually have all 3 in our movement. But one of the things that we need to rediscover is the affective dimension, the heart, as a movement. We have to rediscover that. Can you kindly just go back for a second? But I also discovered, so in Ghana, there are a lot of Methodist churches. So when I walk past the Methodist church, it's not a Free Methodist church. I got to know Ahmed later on when I got into this role. Not the Free Methodist churches, but the Methodist churches in Ghana. I went to a Methodist high school. I never associated Methodism with spiritual renewal and vitality, not because it wasn't present there, but when I studied the history, I was like, whoa, we have a rich theological heritage as a movement. It was a renewal movement that brought revival to England in the 18th century. And I said, what would it look like for us to rediscover that in fresh ways as a movement? So we are a renewal movement concerned with authentic discipleship and spiritual transformation. And like I said, we combine all the 3 aspects of spirituality really well, but we have to rediscover the affective dimensions. But we're also a movement that cares about the poor. We are also a movement that values evangelism. Think about John Wesley. So what does this mean for us as we move forward when we think about health? So those are the questions that we should have in our minds as I'm going through all of this. Like I said, John Wesley would say this is a religion established in the world, a religion of love, joy, peace, having its seat in the heart. So I pray that we continue to rediscover this, so the virtue and the fruits of the Spirit that John Wesley was seeking, the life transformation that John Wesley was seeking, will continue to be a reality in our movement. So that was it for the spirituality. Let's just move on. Personality. So we're going to more demographic data. I had quite a bit of, data to share, and I said, you know what, with the time that I have, I'm just going to focus on just a few. So I recognized I was working also with the the ministry center folks to give me up-to-date information. And as at the time I pulled this was October 2023, during my listening tour, we had 134 churches in total. And again, our department serves all churches across the country. So the question for me was like, okay, how do we need to strategize in making sure that the work that we're doing is able to really impact and serve all these churches that we are called to serve? So that's information for you about the personality of the movement. I had all kinds of graphs about the ethnic diversity and all that, but the racial justice team has already shared a lot of things. But here's something one pastor said that I just wanted to share with you. And the reason why I just pulled this quote, I had so many quotes that I could pull from my listening tour, but this is the reality we are facing right now as a movement, the generational gap. One of FM pastors says that my biggest challenge that we're facing is with young families. We want more. We want young people. We want them to come. We want them to stay. It's a desire. It's a latent desire. And I pray God is going to answer that prayer for us. Another thing I found out when it comes to personality is that context, religion, like region, community, neighborhood is acknowledged as important. So this may not come as a surprise to you, but there are some churches and denominations that this is news to them, that ministry needs to be contextual as well. Like you need to reach out to your neighborhoods. That's part of who we are as a church. There are some denominations that when you introduce that topic, you're like, what? But I recognize that here, thanks to the work that has been done over the years, again, the moving train, the wind of the Spirit's work in this movement has actually allowed this to be embedded into the very DNA of what it means to be Free Methodist in Canada. So that was something that came out as well. If your church hasn't leaned much into that, what does it mean to be a ministry that reaches to the community? That's something to probably take note of. Over the years, FM churches have also been closing. The previous slide. And from the data that I got earlier, a lot of them were church plants and some were societies. And I'm not going to give you the data for that, but those were questions in my mind too, why that? And then there's also many pastors are multi-vocational, but a few aren't. Now, all of this information, again, this was the data that was coming up to us. And during that time that we had in January, we went into prayer times, listening to what God was saying to us as well, all of that. And that process hasn't ended. But I wanted to invite you all into that as well. So I'm just going to keep going. There is a generational gap. I said that already. And a lot of pastors said to me the life plan is very tedious and complex and needs to be simplified. And I think Dave also mentioned that. The development of leaders with the competence to engage peoples of other cultures will be important, like has already been highlighted as well in the Racial Justice Task Force presentation. Okay, so we're at the E, SPEC. So this part became a little tricky because here we're trying to listen to stories. What are some of the stories that have shaped the movement? Things that have happened. Here's some of the things that came out. Okay, some boards are very healthy and have good relationships with their pastors. Others have strained relationships and are unsure of next steps. So some of the things I was hearing. So again, for a team, our department that serves boards, that was helpful for us to remember. How do we equip churches to have healthier boards in the way they function with their lead pastors? There have been issues over the past few years that may have caused a little confusion. We've heard a lot of it from today, so that's okay. But I did have conversations that made me aware that some of the conversations related to the LGBTQ and some of the staff changes and departures were conversations that came up to me as, experiences that have shaped the movement. Connectionalism, people feel part of something bigger. They feel that they love being part of regional gatherings and ministers' conferences and things that connect us and network meetings, and they wanted us to lean more into that. And I would say that for the most part, many pastors love the Free Methodist Church in Canada passionately. Even if they're talking about something that they're passionate about or they wish would be better, you can tell from the passion that they love the denomination. So there's really high pride of association I found when I spoke with pastors and leaders, and very grateful for being part of this movement. Another thing that came up in my listening tour was Church Renewal International. Some of you know it. That would provide mentorship and opportunities and resources for pastors. Several FM pastors said they found it highly beneficial. Church Renewal came up as well. Another thing is, just because of some of the things I was hearing, I felt that our churches will need to teach our congregations how to be peacemakers, gospel-centered, biblically faithful manner, just how to manage conflict in the churches and things like that. Okay, this can keep going. I'm going to go to the C, and I'm going to try to summarize this, because this is also another broad category, the culture of the Free Methodist Church. Culture is a complex thing. Canada has inherited a culture of Christianity that goes way back to, if you study church history, you can trace it way back. But I'll just say a few things that came up to me that I'm thinking may be helpful for us as we think about health. Is being intentional about uprooting any remnants of historical Christendom and Constantinian Christianity. And I know that it could be a mouthful, but some of you who may understand what I'm saying, you would know that historians and missiologists have done a lot of study about Christianity in the West and have been able to highlight the fact that we are still wrestling with the aftermath of some of the impact of Christendom. And I would not be able to go into all of the meanings of that, but I would say one thing just to help us. One of the things that happened, obviously, the Battle of Milvian, the Milvian Bridge Battle, which that made Constantine become the first Christian Roman emperor, and converted to Christianity, and from that time, all of Europe, became the stronghold of Christianity. All of that. But one of the things that happened was his view of the cross. He apparently saw a vision of the cross in the sun, and we know that he also worshipped the sun god. As this whole question as to whether it was a genuine conversion. I'm not going to go into that, but he saw a vision of the cross in the sun and painted all the shields of his soldiers when he was going into that battle with the cross, the sign of the cross. And when they went, they had an overwhelming victory. So that victory, in October 28th, 312 AD, Constantine became the topmost ruler of the Roman Empire and converted to Christianity because he attributed his victory to the God of Christianity on his way to battle. One of the things that has done over the years, and New Begin and some others have written extensively about this, but the distorted view of what the cross symbolized as forceful subjugation and dominance rather than self-denial there's still remnants in the church. The cross is a symbol of self-denial. Obviously, our Savior, the King of the world, was there, naked, beaten. He was denying himself for you. It's not a symbol of conquest, like Constantine may have said. I was able to conquer in Jesus' name. So those are some of the cultural pieces that are deep, and hoping that over the years that God grants us the opportunity to uproot that, we could continue to intentionally do that. And then the culture of generosity, and Sandy's team is continuing to do that. It will be helpful for us to continue to cultivate that, and grateful for the leadership of Bishop Cliff, who has always pushed for prayer. And that culture is growing. Thank you for those of you who have leaned seriously into that. Renewal, there's always a center of prayer as we are praying about health, because God is the renewing presence that brings about refreshing and renewal into our churches. And one of the ways we engage God and make him know that we trust him is to actually spend time with him and to pray. And then to develop strategic plans that come out of our encounter with God to fulfill some of the things that he's told us in prayer. It's the prompting that comes before the planning. And the two work together. Renewal is so possible. Okay, I'm going to rush through. And so how are we going to measure success by the end of 2024? Here's a lot of things we've done, listening toward, trying to understand where we are going, all of that. I wanted to kind of give myself a few things to move towards as a team as we work together. Engage at least 2 churches to pilot our new church health pathway, because what came out of this was a new church health pathway. I'm going to be talking a little bit about it during my workshop tomorrow. What is the church health pathway? Again, we recognize that we had a lot of tools And sometimes churches we aren't sure how to, so we condensed it, we integrated the essential elements of what we saw that Life Plan was trying to do and created almost like a simplified version of what church health could look like. And I would love to hear feedback after the workshop and all of that. But we want to pilot that with at least 2 churches before the end of 2024 to see how that's playing out. We're already in conversations with a few of them. If you're interested, please let any of us know about that. We also want all our churches to be aware of that new church health pathway. I want to hear more feedback. I got feedback that was very helpful from the 30 pastors that I engaged. The goal is also to put this pathway into some clear communication medium, including infographic and all of that, videos and all of that. Our coaches, to ensure that our coaches are well-trained and well-versed in the new church health pathway, we've already started that process, and I'm working closely with some of them to try to even develop tools around that, and working with some of the old tools and some new tools and things like that. So that's all in place. I'm in the process of putting together a new church health team. I've been taking it slowly as I've got to know pastors across the denomination. I know I need a team of people that cut across the entire country, represent different backgrounds, gender, lay, clergy, all of that. So I think I have a list that I'm slowly working through inviting to be part of that church health team. Some of you already have been invited to be part of it, and I ask you to take your time and pray through it. The goal is at the end of 2024, all our planters will know each other and be aware of our new pathway, and I'm going to be inviting Jessica after here to share a little bit more about church planting and what's happening in that direction after here. And also, as part of that, is to continue to build a clear church planting philosophy and approach for the future. And so that's what this past year has been for me. It's been quite a ride. And I want to say thank you all for your embrace and how you have welcomed me into this family. God bless you. I love you.
I'm back. Jervis, thank you for telling us about the time that you spent on your listening tour, and I'm glad that you're on the train, and I've liked working with you so far. So I'm just going to briefly, really short, talk a little bit about what's kind of happened as the departments have merged. So as many of you know, the Ministry Center has seen a lot of change in the past few years, and the department that I'm a part of is included in that. So since our last general conference in 2021, the virtual one, church planting experienced a significant restructuring and a change of leadership. And the National Director of Church Planting job was eliminated, and then Church Health was removed from the partnership that it had with leadership development, so they were kind of linked over here on this side. So Church Health was taken apart, and then it was added over here and merged with Church Planting. So a different kind of merger was created. And this restructuring, it took place just maybe about like a year and a half ago. And so it took 6 months to fill that position. And then, as Jervis explained, he did his listening tour and spent 4 months doing that. So if you do the math, that's almost 2 of the last 3 years were spent in flux, or this adaptation to the flux. So that means actually our team hasn't had a lot of time together focusing on our work and direction. It's all pretty new. And both Laura Lee and I saw our jobs change in January of 2024, so that also required on our part some adjustment and settling into the adaptations that we experienced. And Jervis mentioned too, in February, all of the staff and coaches met for a weekend retreat, which served as a way for Jervis to communicate future direction and for us together to build direction and camaraderie as a team, and I think that was really important. Now, Jervis already covered his plan for the direction of church health and touched on some of the church planting initiatives as well. So we do hope to see several initiatives specific to church planting take form in the next little while. So as we look ahead, these are some of the things that we hope to develop. So we'd like to see the church planting department strengthen the supports that are given to our church plants by hiring hopefully at least one more coach. And so 6 years ago when I started, we had 4 church planting coaches, and we only have 2 right now. So we believe that more support is needed there. We'd like to continue to clarify and simplify the church planting process. So it consists of 5 stages. A lead, so someone, there's a potential, and if the potential seems like a good fit, they become this pre-launch. Once they've developed that, they actually launch, they move into stabilization, and then finally society. It's a long and complex process. Easy for me to lift up and name in one hand, hard to do in reality. And so for us to communicate and to just simplify it a bit more so that it's easier for, I see church planters nodding their head, and they're like, yes, it's crazy. So we just want to try to streamline it and make it simpler and easier. We'd like to focus our efforts and resources on training, developing, and supporting both existing and potential sponsor churches. Sponsor churches are so important for our church plants, and sponsor churches need supports too. Finally, we want to invite you, as pastors and leaders, to notice where there might be leadership potential in your people. We challenge you to nurture and grow these individuals into spiritually healthy leaders and planters in our movement, because they're there. Jervis says the Spirit is blowing through. They are there. I'd like to conclude by sharing a video. This is a story of one of our church plants in Calgary. This plant grew out of an existing society, right? The pastor spent time noticing and then nurturing this planter and then releasing them to guide and develop a new church initiative. So we want you, churches, start thinking about this. Think about potentially who's in your midst, or think about how you might be interested, or are you interested in planting? If you or your church are thinking about planting within the next 5 years, or if you have planters or potential planters in your midst, please let us know so that we can build this future together.
We bought about a year ago, and we bought just a little duplex. And the biggest thing was that we were looking, because our family, me and my wife Katie, our family was growing, and so we needed something a little bigger, but we needed something that could do church. So an open space like this was perfect for church. And so it's kind of interesting as we're looking at houses. One of the criteria isn't, oh, we need this many bedrooms and bathrooms. It's, oh, we need a space big enough to seat 25, 30 people, which isn't a common real estate checklist item. So the way I describe it to people is that the denomination gave me the foundation. My mentor Dan, who church planted for, he gave me the studs of the structure, and I was able to fill in the rest to decorate it myself. And that was huge because it helped me just flesh out ideas with people, and I didn't have to start from square one.
And so Dan kind of set it up that it would be about 3 years that Bryce would be learning underneath him. I would tag along a little bit, and then eventually after that 3 years we would plant somewhere, either renting or in our home, and we thought the home would be the best option.
We checked out Pine Ridge and really enjoyed it, and so we signed on and said, whenever you guys are ready to church plant, we're in, and we're in 100%. So that was kind of where we started with Chapel House.
I lead worship, and for a while it was just me because the other worship leader had a baby, and so yeah, it's been a growing, I've never led worship before, so this has been a new thing for me. It's stretched me and challenged me, but it's been neat to, just be able to be a part of the church, and our kids come and get to be with us and be a part of the life of the church, and people love them, and it's been a really special place for us.
The home is a place where I find people can really bond on a personal level because it's a safe environment. When you go to somebody's home for dinner, this is where you're meeting. You're not meeting at some other building. It just really builds that personal connection of church planting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those reports. Whether you're on a 4-month listening tour, talking to pastors and delegates and other leaders across the country, whether you've been working on a team, a task force for about 10 years, a lot of work goes into all of this. So thank you for all of that work and all of the work that the BOA has done as well in all of that. So we just want to thank our break sponsor, Roberts Hall, for our next break. And just a quick reminder, friends, if you haven't taken your picture, please do so. You can go to the office and somebody will take a great shot of you, right? So we can have it in the directory so we are all known. And again, the prayer room is open, so please take advantage of that and take some time to pray as well. It's important for all of us. Thank you, and yes, be back at 3:30. Bishop Cliff said so, okay? So 3:30, friends, come back. Thank you.